tent, and that was the time their relationship started growing.
All right, Benjamin Hall, thank you so much. We appreciate that. That's going to be a fun wedding to watch for sure. We are awaiting the White House briefing. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dana Perino, and here is Shepard.
It's noon on the West Coast, 3 o'clock at the White House, where the press secretary is set to brief reporters at any moment. Actually, I just heard seconds ago the press briefing will begin in just about 15 minutes. We'll hear from her then after a report that a lawyer for President Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has now met with the special counsel Robert Mueller's team. Of course, there are questions about whether Michael Flynn is either in the process of cutting a deal with prosecutors or whether he may already have cut a deal with prosecutors, and questions about what he may have to offer them. We're also watching some Capitol Hill controversies. First, President Trump expressing support for the Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore, despite the accusations of sexual misconduct with teenagers. The top House Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, at first defending the Democrat John Conyers, despite his sexual harassment controversy, but then calling for zero tolerance. It was an awkward juxtaposition. Plus, Fox News talks with a woman who says John Conyers called her into his office while he was in his underwear. And the Democratic Senator Al Franken again apologizing and admitting he cannot be sure he never inappropriately touched a woman. In the meantime, lawmakers are back to work after the Thanksgiving break. A lot to do before the end of the year. For instance, the tax plan. And on a lighter note, get ready for a royal wedding. Harry to marry an American actress. Let's get to it.
Breaking news. Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
And the breaking news is coming to us from the White House itself. An awkward thing just happened, as it's been described to me, at an event there in the Oval Office. An event honoring World War II code talkers who were Native Americans. President Trump was introduced by a Navajo code talker. And in passing, while speaking of the age of those in attendance from World War II, obviously they're not brand new people. The man with whom he was speaking, I'm told, was 90. And the president made reference to Senator Elizabeth Warren, said she was there, that she's older than they, and reminded the Native Americans, as it's been told to me in attendance, that, as he put it, people here call her Pocahontas. That was met with, I'm told, awkward silence. What we were watching, what you were watching with us just a moment ago, was a playback of this from the White House, and I think we can show you a bit of this. We haven't gotten to that point in the tape. Remember how this always works. If it's not a live event, the White House decides what's available live to the White House pool. The pool is the three big networks plus CNN and Fox News and others who come together and work to pool the resources of all the media there so that we can see events like this. Well, the White House says, well, this is available for live or it's just for tape playback. This was not available for live. So the pool for the day goes in and videos the whole thing so that there's a record of it and so that afterwards we can play it back. Well, this is the build-up to this time in which the president, sort of offhandedly, obviously, referred to Elizabeth Warren, as he has in the past, did on the campaign trail, as Pocahontas. In this company, well, we'll see for ourselves how it was received when the playback gets to that point in just a minute. We'll have that for you. First, a live look, the briefing room where the press secretary Sarah Sanders is set to take the podium. It was scheduled for 2:30 Eastern time, then it was moved to 3. Now it's been moved to 3:15, so about 12 minutes from now we'll bring you that in its entirety once it gets underway. But first, President Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn could be flipping on the White House. ABC News now reports that Michael Flynn's lawyer met with the special counsel Robert Mueller's team this very morning. That's another sign that he may be either talking about cutting a deal with the feds on the Russia investigation or that a deal may have already been reached. We do not know. Fox News has a call out to Michael Flynn's legal team, but we've not heard back from him. We learned last week that the former National Security Advisor's attorneys stopped sharing details with President Trump's lawyers on the Justice Department's investigation. Now, that's significant. Robert Mueller is looking into Russia's meddling in the 2016 presidential election and the possibility of collusion with members of President Trump's campaign. The White House and the Russian President Vladimir Putin have repeatedly said there was, quote, no collusion, unquote. Fox News has confirmed Mueller's team is investigating Michael Flynn for failing to register as a foreign agent when he was lobbying for Turkey. Also, accusations he talked about a plot to kidnap a Turkish cleric living in Pennsylvania. a $15 million fee for that. Flynn's denied it. Analysts say Michael Flynn had been worried the special counsel would target his son, Michael Flynn Jr., who served as his father's chief of staff and worked for his dad's lobbying firm. Our Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano, says White House lawyers should be, quote, very concerned, unquote, that Michael Flynn's legal team has stopped giving them information. Let's get the reporting of our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, who's live in Washington. Catherine?
Thanks, Shep. We're working to confirm, as you mentioned, that the lawyer for Mike Flynn, former national security advisor, met with the special counsel this morning here in Washington. This photo here shows the special counsel office space in downtown D.C. It recently expanded to a second floor. The decision by Flynn's legal team to cut contact could indicate he is close to cooperating, cutting a deal, or refusing to cut a deal in this case. A source close to the president's legal team tells Fox News that they believe Flynn's greatest exposure is on this work for Turkey, and this work does not touch the president or Russia. And we are expecting more White House interviews as early as this week. Fox News has learned that investigators are focused on a November 2016 statement from then-campaign spokeswoman Hope Hicks that there were no contacts between the Trump campaign and foreign entities. The issue is whether Hicks was directed to make the statement, by who, and on what basis. We're also told investigators are focused on Hicks' role as a gatekeeper for the president, Shep.
Catherine, the FBI responding to a report that Russian hackers targeted U.S. officials.
That's right. In response to an AP investigation, the FBI issued this statement saying they provide warning to the service providers. And one of the biggest challenges the FBI faces is just the sheer volume of hacking. That statement reads in part, the FBI routinely notifies individuals and organizations of potential threat information and will continue to work closely with federal, state, and local partners to keep the public informed of potential threats. A leading cybersecurity analyst told Fox News this morning that there were warnings to law enforcement and the U.S. intelligence community as early as 2015 that about 2,300 government officials and their spouses were targeted by the cyber espionage group known as Fancy Bear. The coordinated attack, and this is what's significant here, came 1 year before the U.S. election, and it's seen by many cybersecurity analysts as helping to lay the groundwork for Russia's interference during the 2016 campaign. The analyst said the compromise of Yahoo and Gmail accounts was then used by the hackers to take over functions of the victim's mobile phone, to hijack their contact lists, and to utilize the mic settings, Shep.
Catherine Herridge, live in Washington. Catherine, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Let's turn to Ken Thomas, White House reporter for the Associated Press. Ken, good afternoon.
Hi, Chef. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Your take on where we are with this?
You know, it's an interesting investigation that we've pursued. I mean, we found more than 80 U.S. officials who had been contacted, who had been spammed by Fancy Bear, and only a handful of them were actually given a heads up from the FBI that they had been targeted in this way, and many of these officials were, in some cases, former ambassadors, in some cases, you know, in law enforcement or national security, and they just said that, you know, we really would have liked to have known long ago that we had possibly been compromised here.
What's your take on this, Michael? Whether Michael Flynn, help our viewers understand why it is that no longer cooperating with the president and his team is an indication that something significant has changed.
Usually, when you're on the same legal side, you will communicate. So the White House lawyers have been in touch with Flynn's lawyers in the past, and they share information. But when you can no longer do that,
what that's called? Shared judicial interest?
That's right. And so the concern is that if Flynn is close to cutting some sort of deal, they won't be able to share any more information with the White House. And, you know, to just cut to the chase here, I mean, this potentially brings this investigation right into the White House. You know, the past examples that your viewers know about, Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, they were involved in the campaign and they were not here in the White House. So if Flynn is going to cut some sort of deal where he might provide some information to Mueller's team about what happened in the White House, it could be much more damaging to the officials here.
Because you don't cut a deal if you're a prosecutor with someone unless, A, that someone can provide to you information about someone higher than you in the food chain, and whether whatever that information is, you believe is significant enough to where you would grant some level, not of immunity, but special treatment of some kind. Is that right?
Right. These investigations usually work from the outside in. And what could be happening is that Flynn's lawyers could be having, quote unquote, off the record sessions with Mueller's people to find out what Mueller's team has on Flynn. And then Flynn in return could do what's called a proffer, where they would say, this is the information that we could offer you that might implicate others.
One more matter before we go to this video of the president. The president's people have now said, though he is clearly supporting Roy Moore or the efforts of the Republican over the efforts of the Democrat in the state of Alabama, the president's people now tell us he will not be actively campaigning for him in Alabama.
That's right. White House officials told us today that he's not expected to campaign for Roy Moore in Alabama before the December 12th special election. I think this is a safe space for the president. He can express his views on Twitter, perhaps in quick back and forth with reporters, but he doesn't run the risk of going back to Alabama, campaigning for him, and being burned. And if he does go down there and campaign in person, if Moore wins, he's then campaigned for somebody who, in all likelihood, could be prevented from being seated by members of the Republican Party. If he goes down there and campaigns for him and Moore loses, then it will be a second time that in a matter of, say, 6 months that this president has gone down to campaign for somebody in Alabama and has lost.
Ken Thomas is the White House reporter for the Associated Press. Ken, it's good of you. I appreciate it. Now to this matter at the White House. I've described it to you as best I could a minute ago, where the president was hosting some World War II code talkers, American heroes themselves, Native Americans who were Native American code talkers. They did a fairly lengthy introduction, but it seemed to me about 10 minutes just by monitoring the feed as it came in. And then the president took to the microphone in the Oval Office to make statements, and here it is.
Although we have a representative in Congress who they say was here a long time ago. They call her Pocahontas. But you know what? I like you because you are special. You are special people. You are really incredible people. And I have to, from the heart, from the absolute heart, we appreciate what you've done, how you've done it, the bravery that you displayed, and the love that you have for your country. Tom, I would say that's as
well, there you go. So the
gets.
White House pool had described this event to us because, as I mentioned, I hadn't seen it. It was described to us by the pool, and I don't know. You know, these guys are code talkers from back in the day. I'm not sure it registered all that much at all. I'll leave that for you to decide, but we were just watching it. It was something that the pool noted, and we brought it to you as a result of that. As it turns out, Elizabeth Warren is making live comments on another network at the moment on another matter. And I don't know if this bubbles up into something, we'll give it to you, but that he calls her Pocahontas isn't new, that it's controversial isn't new. As we wait for the White House briefing to begin, by my count 2 minutes from now, but we'll see, you know, it's always sort of a give and take, no matter who the president is or who the press secretary is. It's never exactly when they say it's going to be. Waiting for developments in that special election in Alabama, where the Republican Roy Moore, as we were just discussing, has refused the calls to step down after accusations of sexual misconduct involving teenagers, some of them as young as 14. President Trump now giving Roy Moore that boost with the support for him, but as we just discussed with Ken Thomas from the Associated Press, he won't be campaigning down there. You heard Ken's take on that. We'll have the new word from the White House and the briefing itself as it begins, and I don't know, presently. We'll slide in one commercial break so that we won't have to take one during it. That's coming up on Fox News Channel. 16 minutes past the hour now, and a live look at the White House, the briefing room. Press Secretary Sanders, set to begin the briefing at any moment. Expecting questions about Roy Moore, obviously, as President Trump doubles down on his support for the Republican Senate candidate down in Alabama, home of Auburn and Alabama. The president also going after the Democrat in the race, Doug Jones. The president tweeted, "The last thing we need in Alabama and the U.S. Senate is a Schumer-Pelosi puppet who is weak on crime, weak on the border, bad for our military and our great vets, bad for the Second Amendment, wants to raise taxes to the sky. Jones would be a disaster." The White House initially said Roy Moore should quit the Senate race if the accusations of sexual misconduct with teenagers are true. Republican leaders in Congress have called on him to step aside immediately. Roy Moore, of course, denies the accusations. The president says you have to listen to him also, and that's a quote. Today, a White House official told the Associated Press the president will not campaign for Roy Moore, as we reported earlier. The president last week suggested that he might. He said he'd let us know this week. It appears he's let us know. The White House official confirmed to Fox News there is nothing on his schedule at this time, and that's a quote. The election is 2 weeks from tomorrow, and Kristen Fisher is live in the White House briefing room where she's waiting for Sarah Sanders along with all of us. Alabama on our mind. Hello, Kristen.
Hey, Shep, yeah, Alabama's on everybody's minds. And, of course, that's really complicating the White House's top priority before Christmas, which is, of course, tax reform. President Trump promising tax cuts by Christmas. But, this race in Alabama really complicating that. And, before President Trump left on Thanksgiving break, he left the door open to possibly campaigning for the Republican Senate candidate, Roy Moore. Today, there have been multiple reports that the White House says he will not be doing that. He will not be campaigning for him ahead of this December 12th election. And our sources here at the White House tell us that there's simply nothing on his schedule at this time. So that could change, but it certainly appears likely that President Trump is going to continue to do what he was doing over the weekend, which is not actively campaigning for Roy Moore, but instead really pushing voters in Alabama to vote against his opponent, Doug Jones, calling him weak on crime, weak on immigration, even though a lot of the Republican members of the House and Senate would like him to be a bit more forceful in his condemnation of Roy Moore after being accused of molesting young girls down there so many years ago.
Another subject that's out there today. Tell us more about this fight over the job at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's quite a dust-up.
Shep, it's quite a dust-up, quite a story. It's fascinating. Everybody here in Washington, here you have two people, essentially, that could have been showing up for work for the same job at the very same time. You have President Trump appointing his budget director, Mick Mulvaney, to this job on Friday, but the outgoing director of the CFPB, he had appointed his own person to the post, and this outgoing director was appointed to that job by President Obama. So you have a President Obama holdover going against President Trump's appointee, and now that Obama-era holdover, his replacement is suing the Trump administration. And at this hour, right now, you have Senator Elizabeth Warren, who was instrumental in the creation of the CFPB after the 2008 financial crisis. She is going to be sitting down with the person that she believes should be the acting director at the same time that Mick Mulvaney is going to be holding his own press conference just across the street. So really a battle of dueling directors here, and there's going to be a lot of questions about that here at the briefing today, Shep.
Kristen Fisher at the briefing. Kristen, thank you. Again, when it starts, we'll take you back there live. Meantime, as it so happens, seconds after we got the playback of the president making those comments about Senator Elizabeth Warren, she was the guest of Ali Velshi on MSNBC, and at the end of a fairly lengthy conversation, I'm told, Ali asked her about this, and she said, Senator Warren said the following: "This was supposed to be an event to honor heroes, people who put it all on the line for our country, and people who, because of their incredible work, saved the lives of countless Americans and our allies. It's deeply unfortunate," said Senator Warren, "that the President of the United States cannot even make it through a ceremony honoring heroes without having to throw out a racial slur." She finished by saying, "Donald Trump does this over and over, thinking somehow he's going to shut me up with it. Hasn't worked in the past, won't work in the future." That from Elizabeth Warren, the senator, in what appears to be a bit of a dust-up with the White House that's occurred in the last 30 minutes over an event honoring Native American heroes. The House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has changed her tune on her colleague, the Democratic Congressman John Conyers, and it happened in just about the most awkward way you could ever imagine. Even Democrats have said politically disastrous. She initially defended John Conyers after accusations that he sexually harassed staffers, calling him an icon and the rest. But after catching some criticism, and after he came forward to say he's stepping down from his committee chair, she's backing down. And Fox News has talked to a woman who says the congressman once paraded before her in his skivvies. We'll have that and the White House news briefing when that begins, mercifully, in a few moments. Well, that was a short commercial, wasn't it? Sarah Sanders is at the podium, so let's listen, one and all.
quickly transitioning from Thanksgiving to the Christmas season here at the White House. This morning, the First Lady unveiled this year's decorations, and she personally selected and was involved in every detail. The theme, Time-Honored Traditions, was designed by Mrs. Trump to pay respect to 200 years of holiday traditions at the White House. During the month of December, the White House will host more than 100 open houses and numerous receptions, and more than 25,000 visitors will walk the halls, taking part in public tours. Speaking of Christmas, the President is looking forward to the Senate bringing us another step closer to delivering a big, beautiful Christmas present to the American people in the form of massive tax relief. To that end, on Wednesday, the President will travel to St. Charles, Missouri to deliver an important address to the nation on the need for tax cuts and reforms. Unemployment is already at a 17-year low. Wages are starting to raise. The stock market continues to hit all-time highs, and optimism is through the roof. Just imagine what's going to be possible when this plan passes. I think it will be a great lead into the Christmas season and something we can all be excited about. And with that, I will take your questions. Jeff.
Sarah, is Director Mulvaney firmly in charge of the Consumer Financial Protection Agency today, or is there still a back and forth between him and Leandra English on who's actually the boss?
Director Mulvaney has taken charge of that agency, and he has the full cooperation of the staff, and appeared there this morning, and things went very well on his first day over at CFPB.
How did he handle that power struggle when he arrived there?
I think that the legal outline shows very clearly who is in charge of that agency, and both he and the White House, as well as the general counsel for CFPB, who was appointed by Condrey, said that he has the legal standing to be there and serve as the director, and we all agree with that, and again, feel very confident in moving forward. Cecilia?
Why not just fire Leandra English?
Look, she's still the deputy director and has a legal standing in that capacity, but not as the director.
And do you believe, does this White House agree with Mick Mulvaney when he called this agency a joke?
Look, we think that a lot of the past practices under the previous director and under the previous administration were used more to advance political ambitions and not about protecting American consumers, which is what that's supposed to be. And our goal is to make sure we get back to that. Matthew.
Thanks, Sarah. Does the president still accept the authenticity of the Access Hollywood tape that he apologized for during the campaign?
Look, the president addressed this. This was litigated and certainly answered during the election by the overwhelming support for the president and the fact that he's sitting here in the Oval Office today. He's made his position on that clear at that time, as have the American people in his support of him.
So
John
he
Decker.
apologized for it, which would seem to acknowledge its authenticity, and that position hasn't changed?
No, like I just said, the president hasn't changed his position. I think, if anything, that the president questions, it's the media's reporting on that accuracy. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Just two questions on the CFPB. The first one has to do with whether or not you would like the courts to clear up any confusion as to who is in control of the CFPB. Of course, the lawsuit has been filed. We'd like that case to be, a ruling on that case to be decided very quickly.
Look, of course, we're aware that a lawsuit's been filed, but we're also aware that the law is extremely clear and that Director Mulvaney is the acting director here, as has been outlined by the counsel's office, by the Department of Justice, and, as I said before, CFPB's own general counsel, which was appointed by Condrey. So I think that everybody is in full agreement that he's the director of this office. Trey? Sorry, John, I'm going to try to jump around.
How do you envision the agency operating under Director Mulvaney?
Much better than it has in the past.
In what way? What are the functions of the agency?
Like I said, we're not going to put political ambitions as the number one priority. We're going to make sure that the consumers are actually being protected, which is what the agency was created for. Trey?
Thanks, Sarah. On the Senate race in Alabama, does President Trump plan to campaign for Roy Moore?
The president is not planning any trip to Alabama at this time, and frankly, his schedule doesn't permit him doing anything between now and Election Day.
Over the weekend, the president weighed in about this race on Twitter. Does the president does he have plans to continue his campaign against the Democrat in Alabama, Doug Jones?
Look, I'm not going to get into a back and forth from the podium. As you know, I've declined that opportunity many times. But I can tell you that the president obviously wants people who support his agenda, and certainly wants people that are looking to make America better, to improve our education system, to grow our economy, to continue to fight against ISIS, continue growing the economy. Those are the president's priorities, and he wants people in place that are going to help and support those priorities. Jonathan.
Sarah, at the event that the president just did with the Navajo code talkers, he referred to Pocahontas being in the Senate. Why did he feel the need to say something that is offensive to many people while honoring the Navajo code talkers, these genuine American
I think
heroes?
what most people find offensive is Senator Warren lying about her heritage to advance her career.
Now, she said it was a racial slur. She said it was a racial slur. What is your response to that?
I think that's a ridiculous response.
Let me just follow up with that, because the president was speaking at an event to honor members of the greatest generation, people who fought in World War II, who are in their 80s and 90s now. And the moment had many people online asking whether the president lacks decency. What's your response to that notion?
Look, I think the president certainly finds an extreme amount of value and respect for these individuals, which is why he brought them and invited them to come to the White House and spent time with them, recognizing them and honoring them today. So I think he is constantly showing ways to honor those individuals, and he invited them here at the White House today to meet with them and to also remind everybody about what the historic role that they played many years ago. Kristen.
Why is it appropriate for the president to use a racial slur in any context?
I don't believe that it is appropriate for him to make a racial slur or anybody else.
This is a racial slur, so why is it appropriate for him to use
I think,
that?
like I said, I don't think that it is, and I don't think that was certainly not the president's intent.
Does he see
I think,
political
again,
value
like I said, I think the more offensive, the most offensive thing. I'm sorry?
Does he see political value in calling people out racially? Why use that?
Look, I think that Senator Warren was very offensive when she lied about something specifically to advance her career. I don't understand why no one's asking about that question and why that isn't constantly covered.
You could be two on Syria. First, on Friday, the president's call with Erdogan in Turkey, where he seemingly announced to him that the U.S. is not going to continue arming the Kurds forces fighting ISIS. Do you address some concerns that the U.S. now seems to be backing away from its previous support of a partner in the fight against ISIS?
No, look, once we started winning the campaign against ISIS, the plan and part of the process is to always wind down support for certain groups. Now that we're continuing to crush the physical caliphate, that we're in a position to stop providing military equipment to certain groups, but that doesn't mean stopping all support of those individual groups. But that was the whole purpose, was to help defeat ISIS. We're making massive progress in that front, and once that was moved forward, that was always been the plan, and that hasn't changed.
And just one question about Syria. Is it still a policy of the United States that Assad must go, or is there a sort of more of a containment policy sort of emerging out of the White House?
We don't have any changes in our position at this time. Jeff?
Sarah, back to the Access Hollywood tape. You said that he made his position clear at the time. He said, at the time, he said, "I said it, I was wrong, I apologize." But you just said the media's reporting of its accuracy. So can I ask you again, does the president acknowledge saying that was on the Access Hollywood tape last year?
Look, I said that he'd already addressed it, and that we didn't have any updates to that. I said what he didn't like and what he found troubling were the accounts that are being reported now.
But what counts are being reported now that weren't reported last year? What counts are you talking about?
The ones that are current that he's questioning.
Following up on Steve's question, so what is the official policy on Assad's position? Should he stay or go?
Look, as I just said, we don't have any changes into past statements that we've already made on that front. Nothing new. Blake?
CFPB. Does the White House believe that Leandra English is unqualified for that position?
We believe that Director Mulvaney is the right person at this time to lead that agency, and that's why he's over there.
If you believe that he's the right person, I guess the follow-up then is, what does the White House or what does the President have against Leandra English in that spot?
Look, I'm not saying that we do have anything against her. I'm saying that we want Director Mulvaney to lead this agency, and that's a decision that the president is allowed to make and one that he's made and has legal authority to do so. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Two questions about personnel. The president's appointment of Governor Brownback for the ambassador-at-large slot dealing with religious liberty has been stalled, and the Senate has yet to confirm him or vote on his confirmation. Now, at the same time, the National Security Council staff has a vacant slot that deals with the same issue, religious liberty, that doesn't require Senate confirmation. Is he going to fill that slot on the NSC?
I'm not aware of any specific announcement for that position at this time, but if one happens, we'll certainly make sure you're aware of it.
Now, and the other question is regarding the appointment of Director Mulvaney to a simultaneous presidential appointment. It seems a little odd because this has not been done, according to many accounts, since before World War I.
We're an administration that likes to break new ground, John.
Well, it broke it. The last time was before World War I, when the Secretary of the Treasury was also the first chairman of the Fed. Whose idea was this, or did the president decide to give the dual positions to Director Mulvaney?
Look, I think the president felt like he was the right person to lead this agency, and he made that decision. I don't think there's more to it than that. Fred?
Oh, thank you, sir. One on the CFPB. As far as reforms to the agency, the House has passed the Choice Act. That's still no action on that in the Senate. Is this something, does the administration see this as an opportunity to try to push congressional reforms to the agency?
Look, this is Director Mulvaney's first day. We're going to let him get settled in before we start announcing new policy, but when we do, we'll certainly keep you guys posted. Anita? Sorry, I'm going to try to jump around for save time.
Ryan said the other day that the issue of the Dreamers would not be in the spending bill. We're reaching the end of the year now, and I'm wondering what the president had said that he would take this back up if Congress couldn't act. Negotiations aren't really going anywhere. What does the president propose to do? Does he see that happening in Congress in the next few weeks? Wish for a standalone bill?
Are you talking about specific to, I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Dreamers?
Look, we hope that the Democrats aren't going to put our service members abroad at risk by trying to hold the government hostage over partisan politics and attaching that to that. We've laid out what our principles on immigration are. We want to see responsible immigration reform that would include DACA, but that would also include the priorities that we've already previously laid out.
Don't come up with anything?
Like I just said, we hope that the Democrats are willing to actually make responsible immigration reform. We've laid out what we want, and look, the president's got a meeting with various members tomorrow, and I would imagine that will come up at that time.
With the leaders?
Kristen.
Sarah, what would you say to consumers who are concerned about somebody who once called the agency that he's now ostensibly leading, Mick Mulvaney calling the agency a sick, sad joke? What would you say to consumers who are concerned about somebody like that now ostensibly leading this agency that was designed to protect them?
I think that consumers should be glad that they finally have somebody in there that actually wants to fight for consumers and not fight for their own political ambitions, which we've seen in the previous leadership, and which will be a very different change under Director Mulvaney. David?
Sarah, at this point, Senator Al Franken has allowed that there may be more women coming forward. He doesn't know that there are, but he said there might be more women coming forward. At what point does the president condemn him? How many women does it take? How many accusations does it take before the president says Al Franken should resign? And is he holding back because of some unresolved accusations against himself?
No, I think it's, look, the president's not going to weigh in on every single matter like this. Look, every single day we've got people from the media, from Hollywood, from members of Congress that have allegations brought against them, and we think that this should go through a due process, and that's something that Senator Franken should first be the one to address, and not for the president to weigh in every single time one of these accusations comes up. But there should be a process that we go through, and we want to make sure that that's completed.
You said with the Access Hollywood tape that the people have spoken, the president's president, so that's kind of been litigated. Do you think that
I think the president also addressed it at the time.
Fair enough. Do you think the fact that the president has been elected, that's all been litigated, means that the public believes the women who have accused him in the past of sexual misconduct are wrong?
I think that the president's been very clear that he denies any of those allegations having taken place.
Thank you, Karen. Just to follow up on you saying that the CFPB has not looked out for consumers, can you point to some specific cases where the CFPB did not act in the best interests of consumers?
Yeah, we have a list of those. I'll be happy to provide them after the briefing today.
Some now?
Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me, but I have read multiple things. I'll be happy to provide it to you after the briefing.
Separately, over the weekend, the president went after CNN International. Today, he called out CNN in a tweet. In the conversations that the president has had with Rupert Murdoch, has he ever brought up CNN or talked about the AT&T Time Warner merger?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I know of.
Sarah.
I'll take one last question. Veronica.
Sure, thank you. The last time the president met with congressional leaders, he surprised a lot of people making the deal, if you will, with, he came out and said Chuck and Nancy. It seemed to take Republicans by surprise. Should we expect something like that out of tomorrow? Should Republicans feel anxiety or concern leading into tomorrow's meeting that he may, if you will, throw them under the bus, if you will, leading into tomorrow's meeting?
Look, I don't think the president threw anybody under the bus, but if the president, I'm not going to get ahead of that meeting, but if the president can make a deal and any of those Democrats would like to come on board and support tax reform, I think that's something we'd certainly welcome and be happy to celebrate with them after, as my guess is most of the Republican senators would also be excited about that as well. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good afternoon.
Was the protocol office involved in this Native American event where
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting that none of them asking questions about the tax plan. John Bussey's here, associate editor for the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal and Fox News Channel, Fox News Properties share common ownership, or at least we're sort of corporate cousins. This tax plan, we'll get to all the other stuff, you know, Pocahontas. The tax plan has about 25 to 27% approval among the people, more than 50% disapproval, and largely the reason is probably because over the term of it, it raises taxes on many middle-class people. It lowers taxes on corporate interests and makes those lower taxes on corporate interests permanent. In addition, it lowers taxes, largely speaking, on the wealthiest Americans. That's probably the reason it's not so popular. Just a guess.
So it's still being hammered out, right?
Yep.
This is a marathon that's being compressed into a sprint, isn't it? And there's a desire to get it done before Christmas. Yeah, before Christmas. And there's already kind of rumblings in the Senate that, hey, we may be here right up to Christmas, we may be here right through Christmas.
But that's just to get it done on one side.
Yeah, that's right.
Not, because before a bill can become a law, we've all watched Schoolhouse Rock. We know it has to go through reconciliation.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's not going to happen.
With the House version, which is very different. I mean, there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences still. There's an enormous amount of work still to be done on the tax bill. The companies still aren't really sure what to make of it and how to start planning because they're kind of running their own models and figuring out what the latest kind of small changes and rethinks about pass-through, about a whole variety of things. They haven't really quite figured it out yet. How are these potential new big deficits going to be
at least $1.5 trillion over the course?
Or is the president right in that you will see such economic growth as a result of corporate taxes being cut that economic growth will, on aggregate, produce more taxable dollars, and that'll make up for what's now going to be kind of tallied in the budget as a deficit.
Which is a popular theory among Republicans and fiscal conservatives and has been for a long time, but there's no real evidence that that's
There's a lot of economists that say that's not going to happen. So look, there's a lot of things going on. Christina Peterson of the Wall Street Journal has a story online about this right now, which is that there's a great deal before the Senate and before Congress right now. It's not just trying to figure out the Senate version of the tax bill. There's a budget to resolve, and spending has been allocated up to December 8th. Remember, just a couple of months ago, they allowed for additional spending up to December 8th. You still have a budget that's being wrangled over.
Or a government shutdown.
Or potentially a government shutdown, and now there's discussion of, well, we'll be able to maybe extend that extension by a couple, 3 weeks, so that we can kind of figure out the tax bill implications. Both of them are tied together. Your taxes produce the revenue that forms the budget and the government spending. So
it's kind of one thing.
It is kind of one thing, and that's why you're seeing so many senators right now kind of holding back with their approval of the tax bill because they want to see how that measures up against the budget.
We're almost out of time, so we kind of need a lightning round because there's a few things. Pocahontas? I mean, this is a political rival, past and future, and he says things. He says them. So
he says them. What are you going to do? Yeah. A lot of questions on that in the press briefing. I'm surprised not more questions about the tax bill and the budget.
I know. And then there's Alabama, where he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, which kind of makes sense because you don't want to lose that seat if you're a Republican, but you don't really want to get on the side of an accused child molester. So, you know, or
that's exactly right. So sex harassment is also affecting the tax bill and the budget, right? You don't want to lose. If you're a Republican and the president, you do not want to lose that seat. The margin for passing in the Senate is so narrow as it is. It gets even more difficult if you lose the Republican seat in Alabama.
John Bussey from the Wall Street Journal and WSJ.com. It's nice to see you.
Pleasure.
John. The House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, that's a thing, too. I mean, first she comes out and she says John Conyers is an icon of the Senate. At almost the same time, he's saying, I'm going to step down from my chairmanship so we can have an ethics investigation, and just blew up right in their faces.
And he handed her a very, very positive way of backing out.
He did, but that doesn't make it not egg everywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody's face is covered in this one. She's changed her tune in a huge way on her colleague. She initially defended him after the accusation that he sexually harassed staffers, but after catching some criticism, well, she's backed down from that. And now we're hearing from a woman who says the congresswoman, I should say, the congressman, what's paraded in front of her in his skivvies. We'll have that for you because, obviously, next.